I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. It's the Friday show. You know what that means. We've had this guy on before. We bring in luminaries, people with way more information than I could ever have. This guy's been on the show before. I've been on his show, Everyday Ancestral. Really great show. As a matter of fact, I must have done a bad job. They've never invited me back. So we'll see. We'll ask him about that. Love talking to this guy every time I can get him on the show. He's been on a few times. He's got some great products. He is a great chef. I'm talking about none other than James Barry. Yeah. Oh, wait, where's my music? Oh, there we go. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons today, James. I can't even get my fake audience to applaud correctly.
It's the only thing that's fake about this show.
Yeah. And this is my favorite one. And that's the way this show is going so far. How you doing, man?
I'm good now. I got to tell you, last time, I don't know do you feel different? Cause you feel light right now. And I'm just having so much fun already with you.
I don't know. You know what? Maybe it's because of springtime. I was outside this morning planting stuff. You know, I work in the evenings. I try to use the day when the sun's shining to go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
And, I work early in the morning, right when I wake up. I take care of all the things I have to take care of. I'm now running all of my companies, something I never wanted to do. But, some people were screwing up my companies, so I had to take over. But it's all working, right? I'm making it all work. And it's springtime now, right? And I planted all sorts of herbs, some mint. I don't know why I never use mint, but I plant it, right?
Oh,
It smells good. Lavender, never use lavender, but I plant it, right?
But they're both, I mean, the mint is great because you can infuse it with some water. I just makes water fresher to me. And then of course you can make some tea with it. Yeah. Something I was thinking about, I don't think you get to experience this that much on the West Coast because you're still on the West Coast, right?
Oh, no, I'm in Virginia now.
Oh, okay. Then you do know what I'm about to talk about. Okay, so I'm newer to the East Coast. So I am originally from the West Coast. And so this is only my second winter. I live in Boston area now. And this was definitely like a harder winter than my first one.
Yeah.
And I came out of it going, wait a second. This is kind of how ancestrally people used to live. You survived the winter as a family.
Yeah.
You were like stronger. Like we survived. We're going to like make it. And you came out of that not only more robust as an individual, but as a family unit, you were like, you had some grit, right? And so I'm like, I kind of felt like that with my family. Obviously not to the degree our ancestors used to go through, but I felt like, hey man, we got through this hard winter. This West Coast kid just got through a hard winter. Like I feel stronger. And it's something that you don't get at all on the West Coast.
No, West Coast, you have one season. You have, when you're in Southern California, you have one season. It's summertime year round, unless you go to Mammoth on the weekends to go skiing. And then you have a winter wonderland for 2 days. And then you're back in Southern California riding bikes with your shorts and, short sleeve shirts on and everything. So you never really feel winter, right? So I was out there for 31 years. I really we've been here since late in 2019, right before the pandemic. And I really embrace the 4 seasons, right? Springtime, you plant things, you everything is renewed, right? Summertime.
You feel it internally too, though.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a big deal. Once we turn the clocks back and all that spring forward and the time changes and you have longer days and then summertime comes and, you have the dog days of summer, right? And the heat and the whole thing. But there's a beauty to that. I'm usually right now I'm training to climb a mountain again, right? So I'm in the middle of training. I'm 100 days out. before I go climb. So there's that renewal of, hey, I'm getting outside, I'm exercising. I'm not just exercising in the gym anymore because it's umpty degrees outside. So there's that renewal of spring, and then there's summer, and then the fall comes, right? And you have the four seasons now too, and you get to the fall, and it's like, you start batting down the hatches. You start collecting wood. You get the guy. Well, for me, the guy drops that first cord of wood off, and you're stacking the wood. And I like to, I'll take it and split it again, so I can have smaller pieces for a different stove and all this stuff. And I think back to my grandparents, right? And you and I, we will talk about ancestral stuff. We're going to go way back. I think about my grandparents on my dad's side. They got here in the early 1900s. They
From
had
where?
from Italy. They were
Okay.
Italians, and they were very, very poor. And they basically worked as, for lack of any other term, sharecroppers. Right? They didn't have anything. They were poor, and they were all hardworking. And they lived in an old slave quarter. They couldn't afford, so in the South, a lot of those old slave quarters were still existing back then, right? They were all still up. My grandfather had 10 brothers and sisters. There was 11.
Whoa.
So, you know, 13 people lived in a small slave quarter. That slave quarter was still there. It was torn down during my childhood. And I remember walking in there several times going, how did they do this?
Yeah.
And my dad explained, he goes, the outhouse, you can still see the old outhouse in the back. And there was a ditch that ran underneath. They're taking a crap and the ditch is going, that's how they lived, right? There was no electricity. They used, oil lamps inside of this thing. There was no electricity run to it, right? And they went right from that into the Great Depression, where they still had nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And the Great Depression was, that was in the 1930s. When did that come in? 1929?
29. Yeah. End of 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it went into the 30s, and then World War II broke out, and half of them went to fight all over the world. And you think about their life. And I knew these were all my great uncles, my grandfather, all of them. These people didn't have a care or a worry in the world. They loved life. When you think about what they went through, right? And you see how they lived. And I even said to my grandfather, how did all of you guys live in this space? And he said, we slept head to toe, head to toe, head to toe, head to toe.
Wow.
And we all had a job. My grandfather used an X to sign his name until the day he died, never went to one day of school. Yet one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met. He was illiterate, but he knew about world politics. He knew what was going on. He watched the nightly news every night, right? And when you think about that, that was only 100 years ago, right? No electricity,
Yeah.
no, in the summertime, no air conditioning. In the wintertime, no, all you had was the wood and the fireplace. That was
People
it.
forget how the modern times that we're in, that we haven't been in them very long. The way we're eating, the lifestyles we're living, we haven't really done this very long. And yet I find it interesting that so many people are so all in to these modern conveniences and not valuing some of these ancestral concepts. And when I very much see ancestral concepts as, yes, you can go all the way back Paleolithic times, but I'm talking, let's just go back to our grandparents, like you're talking about right now. Like, there are certain things that have happened in the past that we are losing to these modern conveniences, to these very specific digital lifestyles that we're living. And one of the biggest ones that it sounds like your family inherently had because of its size is community. That there was a sense of groups that were small. You didn't necessarily know what an entire world was doing. You didn't necessarily know what things outside of your immediate community were doing. You really had a not a global perspective, but very much more like an intimate perspective of what was around you. And I think that was a lot more conducive for our nervous systems.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me, like now when people talk about being impoverished and poor, and they go, "Oh, they're robbing and stealing and doing all the pillaging because they're poor," right? Well, hell, my great grandfather was my grandfather. They were all dirt poor,
Right.
not
And they
one,
weren't doing that stuff.
not one crime. And so I was like, okay, so is that the problem, right? Is it because because they were living on a bigger plantation? They saw how the other half lived, right? Why didn't they go steal and rape and pillage and do all this stuff? Because either you do it or you don't, right? And all of that didn't happen. And when you look at I think things are speeding along way too fast now, right? I was watching a movie just 2 nights ago, and the movie was from 2004. 2000. I went back when I was watching the movie. I went, wait, what movie? What year was this movie done? Right? Because they were using flip phones. And they weren't texting, right? It was just like it was the beginning of when you would flip it out and you would call someone, you would flip it close. It wasn't all these. Now, when you watch a movie, you see pop, 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 and they show you what's being texted up on the screen. Okay, we didn't even 2004. No one was using a smartphone. I mean, the
Yeah, it
BlackBerry
hadn't
was
come out
out.
fully yet.
Yeah, the BlackBerry was out, and that was kind of cool and convenient, but that was it, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't even in this movie. Everyone was still flipping it out and doing the whole thing. Now we have we now have generations, right? Where I was talking about this in a podcast the other day. I see guys in the gym. They in between sets, their chin. I can't even do what they do. I'm gonna try to do it right here. Their chin is on their chest, and their head is down, and they're looking at the phone. Right? They can't stop looking. They're hypnotized by this thing. They can't even go to the gym and spend time doing something else, and in between set just stare at a fucking wall. That's where we are, James. People cannot stare at a wall without having a problem.
You can even add to that as well, because I don't wear Bluetooth or any kind of headphone when I'm working out, and I go to the gym every single morning.
Yeah.
And no joke, Vinny. I mean, I think you know this. I think everyone listening knows this. Just go to a gym, take a look around. Every single person has got some headphone in their ear as well. So not only are they looking at screens in between the working out, but they're also always plugged in to something other than sounds outside their body. It's always like music or podcasts or something. And there is something to be said about that, because some people are like, well, this is the only time I have to do that. It's like, yeah, but when are you co-creating time, that static time, that kind of quiet or white space time?
Right.
When are you actually doing that? Because you're making excuses for using it when you work out. You're making excuses for you got to do it when you're walking the dog too, or going for walks. Like, when are you just coexisting in life and listening to the sounds that are naturally around you, visually looking at the sun, the way it goes in between the trees, like really allowing yourself to have a spatial relationship to the world around you? It's very rare.
And I'm guilty of having the earbuds in my ears at the gym.
Try
Right?
it. That's a challenge to you. Try it next time you go without wearing it.
It's not much of a challenge because about half the time I forget.
Ah.
So if I do remember, I'll go, oh, today, I'll just put them in. So I don't have it every time. But yeah, I am guilty of doing that. I don't have the phone with me. The phone's in the locker. Right. And I just have music on because the music they play at my gym is not very good.
Well, yeah, no, and I hear you because I agree. Mine neither. But what is interesting, and this is why it's a challenge to anyone out there, is that when you don't have something blaring directly into your ear, and let's say it's kind of white noise outside,
Yeah.
you actually can hear your own thoughts more. And,
Oh,
and your mind
absolutely.
goes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, your mind goes to places that it doesn't go when there's something directly in your head. You know, specifically if you're listening to a podcast or you're specifically listening maybe to the words of the song, or it's sort of manipulating your attention. And when you allow your own brain and your own kind of energy to go where it wants to go, it's kind of freeing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I look at other conveniences that we have. You know, how old are you, James?
I'm 51 now.
Okay, so you're about 11 years behind me, but I remember, you know, my first car was, you know, I bought it myself. It was a '71 Cougar.
Nice. I remember Cougars.
Yeah, man, it was cool, man. I was so
Yeah.
cool. $700, I got it all in. Yeah,
Remember when cars cost 700 like that? Isn't that crazy to think about? I remember that. You could
yeah,
get a used car for like under $1,000.
yeah. And by the way, guess who still has that car? Me. Still have.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, it needs work. It's sitting in a barn in Louisiana,
I was
and
gonna ask if you kept it up, but so it does need work?
it does need work. The engine runs and everything. I was getting ready. I did some work on it. My brother re-overhauled the engine. My brother's a mechanic, so he did the engine and transmission and drivetrain, and then I was going to fix it up from there and do all that stuff. And then I moved to California back in '90, and it's been sitting in the barn unfinished. But that car, when you think about it, that those were death machines, right? Even though it was a big giant car, right? It was a big car. But if someone hit you from the front, the whole hood is going to come through the windshield and like a guillotine. There was no crumple zones in cars and everything.
Right.
So you knew that if you got into an accident, you could die, right? Like we were taught to drive defensively, right? So, and that car meant everything to me. I didn't even want to get into an accident to where that was my wheels, right? But when you think about it, the cars back then had leaf springs on the back. They had drum brakes all the way around. They were heavy and it took forever to stop them, right? And you think of all the modern conveniences now with cars. And by the way, when you're in a car, you can hear the road noise outside. You can hear the engine in front of you. The cars weren't, you heard everything around you. And we're not talking about a different lifetime. This was in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Right. I had a guy tell me the other day, I'll mention his name because he loves when I mention his name on the podcast. He says I should pay him money. His name is Robert, and he might be Italian, and he might be from Boston, right around where you are.
Ah.
And I love when Robert calls me and we have conversations. And he was like, "Yeah, Vin, I got this car, really nice car. It's like a Porsche, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, Porsches are nice, And he said, "Yeah." But he goes, I have to get all the conveniences, but I like the heated seat. And I like the seat that also has the ass blaster, it blasts cool air in the summertime. And he goes, I would not buy a car without the heated steering wheel. I'm sitting there thinking,
What?
we've really become pussies, haven't we? And by the way, Robert is not a pussy.
Yeah, but I hear you. I hear you. Like,
And I'm sitting there going, yeah, my car doesn't have the heated steering wheel, but I do have the heated seats. And I drive a 4Runner, right? So
yeah.
I'm not driving a lap of luxury, but I got those modern conveniences and I do turn them on. We can't even let our bodies heat up the seat of a car anymore.
No.
Right? I mean, that's how far we've come. Drum brakes and leaf springs, all the way to now we have crumple zones. There's airbags around my car, front, back, center, air curtains on the side, airbag curtains on the side. That's why people are like looking at phones and looking around. You can't hear the people. You can't hear horns blowing around you. We're in this cocoon, right? And I'm not sure that this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think you got to take it as it comes. Like, because I want to stress, I am not against modern conveniences. I actually, in fact, think that if something is more efficient, is something can help you achieve, your desired outcome better, then why not take advantage of it? But I just don't want to lose the things that I believe are important, like connection, community, eating real food versus always looking towards, ultra processed or fast foods, and focusing on those kind of things, but actually like looking towards, well, what are the foods that we ancestrally ate, but that we can utilize in our modern society, like obviously that's why I focus on like organ meats. So I don't necessarily tell everyone like, hey, you should just go eat organ meats. Like if you do, great. But I know that you're not going to necessarily do that. But if I give it to you in a freeze dried form, which is a modern technique, and I make it taste good with seasonings and spices, then maybe you'll do it. So it's very much kind of like you take the best of the past, but then you utilize modern techniques to ensure that you actually do it. Because as you know, from being in this industry, we could talk to her blue in the face about what healthy lifestyle, what you should eat, what you should exercise. But if people don't do it, it's snake oil.
You're absolutely right. And look, I'm a guy who hates, organ meats. I just do. I hate liver. It was foisted on me as a kid. Once a week, we had liver. And it was like, oh, God, it's liver night. I can smell the onions. And everyone goes, I'll make liver and you'll love it. It's like, no, I won't. I'll never love liver because I had bad experiences with it for up until I was 18 and left the house and made a declaration. I will never eat liver again, right? And I've probably had it twice since. But I got into taking, desiccated liver and everything else so I can get my liver. And it wasn't until I met you a couple of years ago and you were like, hey, I make this product called Pluck. And I was like, oh, yeah, what was that about?
You're like, not another product.
Yeah. Oh, really? Another guy with another product. Good. And I think you, against my will, you sent it to me and said, you got to try this.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And then when it showed up, Serena goes, what's that? And I went, I met this guy and he's got this stuff. I don't know. And I literally licked my finger and put it in the plug. And I was like, and then I read it. I was like, wait, this is full of organ meat and it tastes as good as Anna Vocino's stuff. Right. Anna, makes all these powders. And I'm like, I can use this. This works. And it tastes better than desiccated liver. It actually
got it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I became a huge fan of
thing. It's like changing, like even with you having that association as a child with the liver and, the emotional association you have with it. Sometimes all we have to do is change the texture or change the delivery system. And then we can rewire your brain to look at it in a different light,
Yeah, totally worked for me. So James, let's get into, let me do a quick ad. I want to get into your history, how you started down this road. You're a chef. You worked with celebrities out in Hollywood. You and I, we have a lot in common in the celebrity world. I got him in shape, and I don't know how we didn't cross paths because I worked with chefs all the time to get people ready for movies and whatnot. Let me just do a quick ad, and then you can give us your history of what you did. Folks, Villa Capelli. And listen, back during the Ancestral time, during Cro-Magnon Man, they had to make olive oil the old-fashioned way. I don't think there was no olive oil back then. But, we used to have real olive oil in this world, and at some point, it became this crazy thing. As a matter of fact, I heard a podcast about just how bad olive oil is, and it's almost as bad as the drug cartels. I'm not kidding. We had the guy on this show 10 years ago who did the book Extra Virginity, and he was the first one that brought it to my attention. But I can promise you, Villa Capelli olive oil does not have any of those problems. It's 100% pure olive oil. I use their product in one of my products. When you have vitamin D, you have to hook it to an oil. Most people make it and hook it to a seed oil. Not me. I hook it to Villa Capelli, and you're getting the good stuff. But don't just get it in your vitamin B tablet over at purevitaminclub.com. Put it on your salads. And in order to do that, you need to go to villacapelli.com. When you get to checkout, put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE, save 10% every single time. Villa Capelli. And if you can't remember the name, just go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the Villa Capelli banner. It'll take you to the same place. But put that promo code in so that you can save a few buccarinos. We're talking to James Barry from the Everyday Ancestral podcast. James, you and I should have crossed paths in Hollywood, yet we never did.
Yeah,
How did
it's
that
pretty
happen?
shocking. It's pretty
Yeah.
shocking. I know. So I was cooking for some of the top, actors out there like Tom Cruise, George Clooney, and yeah, I'm shocked that we didn't, because I definitely got to meet some of their trainers, and I can't remember if you and I ever talked about this, but inevitably the question I always got when I was living in, being a private chef and during that time of my life is, so how did these people treat you? How were they nice to you? And I'm like, man, everyone's nice to their chef because you're making their food. What do you
And
what are
you
you gonna
feel
treat your chef
yeah,
like crap, and then
exactly.
they're gonna spit in your food or something? Like, you don't do it. But I would definitely see them be challenging and with their trainers. And so did you ever get kind of like that lip and stuff from the people you were working with?
Not a whole lot, because I had a thing where I didn't need you, right? So I had a wait. It's always good to have a waiting list. So it was nice to be me, right?
Yeah.
If you're gonna start messing around, I'm good. See you later. And I was known for firing people, like
Ah,
so I would fire them, which is unusual in Hollywood. And so they knew going in, I didn't care who you were, right? If, and I would say to them, one of the things I would do is when they would call me in, they would go, sometimes they would, hey, how long is it going to take me to get in shape? And I would go, okay, you need to find someone else. And they go, well, what? It's like, if you're worried about the destination
mm,
and you're not worried about the journey, you're going to get to where you need to be and you're going to just go right back to where you are now. So why start? Let me recommend other trainers for you. And they were, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't be so hasty. Yeah. And so I would play those games with them to let them know that I don't care who you are. I really don't need you because I got, and they all knew who was in my arsenal, right? They knew who I was working with. And so I use that to my advantage, right? You're in a different spot, right? Everyone loves the chef, right?
yeah. I mean, yeah, it was interesting. I would work with a client, and I would see people getting cut. A lot of these celebrities that they have, it's like a revolving door in terms of personal assistants and all the different modality people they're working with health wise. They just come in and out, and I just kept finding myself still there. I didn't ever get cut from the team, kind of thing, and I felt very fortunate about that. But you bring up something really really interesting about that. If they're focused on the destination, I have to wonder. I'm curious about your thought around this, but like, we were talking earlier about, the people not really allowing for white noise, and they're always being inundated with content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's constant output or input. But do you think that that's limiting people from exploring deeper work? You know what I mean by that? Because that's one thing is I find is I work with people, and as I've gotten older, that it's the deeper work that keeps you tethered or grounded to your desired outcome. And when I say deeper work, I'm talking like your motivations and why working on like your limitations, or like exploring like your own kind of shadows around what's keeping you from your desired outcome. I just find that that's a more rare trait than I thought. I thought everyone did it, and I'm realizing more and more that a lot of people don't take the time to go very deep inside themselves.
Well, guys like you and I figure it out. And, let's go back to the actors, right? For some reason, people have this idea that a Tom Cruise type person is they sit around and everyone does everything for them.
Right.
Actors are some of the most resilient, some of the toughest people. They don't become, Clooney doesn't become Clooney. people go, oh, well, of course Clooney's a great looking guy, right?
No, he
Go,
didn't make it in Hollywood for a long time.
yeah, go to Hollywood. There's 1,000 guys that make Clooney look like a bag person, right, on the street. It's not just good looks, right? People think, oh, I'm good looking, I'm going to leave the Midwest and I'm going to go to Hollywood. And they don't give a fuck about you and good looks. I mean, it happens to women more than guys. You know, I'm the most beautiful girl in my school, and I won Miss Iowa and the whole thing. They get to Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't give a good F who you are, right? The ones that make it, you know, the J-Los of the world. People, oh, J-Lo is nuts and crazy and all that. J-Lo wakes up in the morning. She starts exercising and stretching and dancing and working on her voice. And I don't think people realize the only people that get away with stuff like that, and I think it's a peculiar, but they actually work hard too. Like the Kardashians, right, where they don't have a particular talent.
Well,
Right?
it's a different type, right? They're famous for being famous, right? But yeah, I think you're right. I think they do have to work at it. They're running businesses. They have to keep their bodies. Who knows what exactly they're doing? Maybe they're
They're
doing,
working at it every single day. They
yeah,
just don't sing, dance, or act. Right?
right. They
They
don't have that kind of talent. Exactly.
right. They figured out another way to do it. Right? You know, they're famous for famous, as you said. But I don't think people realize how easy it is to be a trainer to those people because the motivation is there, right? The motivation to want to be the best. And a lot of times, I don't think it's about the paycheck with those people, right? They know the big paycheck is coming, right? That, you know, whether it's a sitcom, back in my day, I had a lot of sitcom actors. And if you were the lead in the sitcom, you made more than movie stars.
Oh yeah, I remember
Right?
$200,000 per episode, kind of thing. Yeah, or
Oh,
more.
millions. I had clients that were in the millions. And
Yeah.
now you could probably go figure out who those clients are. But you know, some of these guys got $1 million an episode,
Oh wow.
right? And by the way, when those shows are done, if they go past 100 shows and they get sold into syndication, they're now making money. You know, they make mailbox money for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give one name because people know I'm associated with him. Brad. Oh God, his last name
What
is
was he in?
Everybody Loves Raymond, the tall
Oh,
brother.
Brad, the tall guy, Brad.
I'm one of
Oh
my clients. Guy wrote me checks every week, and I can't tell you his name.
no,
Um,
I know you're talking about the brother. He played the
yeah,
tall brother. He's the
yeah,
taller brother.
Jewish guy. I trained him. I trained his ex-wife. I trained his kids. Right, and right now I'm blanking on his name, but people know I'm associated with him because it used to be on Wikipedia before they pulled me off of Wikipedia. But you know, guys like that, yeah, he was making $1 million an episode.
Mm.
Raymond was making 2 million an episode. You know, when you get up in the years and those things, so the motivation is there, right? And those guys never stop, right? They just never stop. They just keep going. Um,
Yeah.
which is an interesting thing, right? And people go, "Oh, these celebrities just sit around and do nothing," right? But they do stuff. They do a lot of stuff. Let's see if I can figure out his name right here.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can look
Oh,
outside.
I'm sorry. Brad Garrett is.
Garrett, yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
why dude. You know how many checks I got from Brad
Yeah,
Garrett
Garrett, yeah, totally.
and blanked on his name. That's
Yeah.
how much I love celebrities.
He's a tall guy. He's taller than Ray Romano.
Oh yeah, he was like 6'8", something like that. He's a
Yeah, that's crazy.
very kind human being, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's funny? So I've cooked for some billionaires, and you would think that money doesn't necessarily define whether someone's nice or not. But I gotta tell you, all the billionaires I worked for, they are the nicest, most down to earth people I had personally interacted with inside the industry. And I always found that interesting because you'd walk around their house, you'd see like, multiple $1 million art, on their walls. I mean, just completely other level kind of living. And
Yeah.
yet they would sit in at the kitchen. So they wouldn't be sitting in a dining room eating dinner. They'd be sitting at the little table in the kitchen with the help
Yeah.
eating their food.
Yeah, yeah. I lived with a billionaire. I never tell this story, man. You're bringing out stuff right now.
I love doing that to you.
I lived one of my best friends in the world, and it's not my buddy Don Coddington, who we say is a billionaire, but he's not really. There was this woman, and she lived in Beverly Hills, and she brought me in as her trainer in the early '90s, and we became very close friends. She had been married a few times in her life, but not married anymore. She had the money. She didn't get the money from marriage. I won't talk about how she got. The money was hers, and she was a bona fide millionaire. Had billionaire. She had houses all over the world, right? And I asked her a few years in, she would always confide in me. We were very close. I ended up moving into her guest house, and I lived there for years and years and years in Beverly Hills. And I said, Jill, what is it about me that what are you attracted to with me? And she said, I knew that you were a good person early on because you never asked me for money.
Mm,
You never came to me with some harebrained scheme of how you were going to make money and wanted to. You've never done that. And I just started trusting you. And the more and more I trusted you, the closer we got. Right.
yeah.
And there I was, I was renting from her, right? Living and, you know, watching the way she navigated the world and the people around her. She treated her help, you know, like you wouldn't believe, right? It was just great. I mean, everyone loved working for her. She had tons of people around her, everyone loved her. Everyone loved her. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget she had 2 cars in Beverly Hills. Now she had other cars at other houses around the country, and one car was a 1983 Toyota Corona. That's a car
What?
Toyota. The Corona became the Camry at some point.
Yeah, I remember the Corona. What the heck was she doing with that?
That was her everyday driver, and she had a 1981 or 1979 Fiat Spider.
Okay, a
That,
little nicer. Yeah.
that was
Okay.
in mint condition, right? And
Okay.
she drove those 2 cars
Huh.
and loved driving those 2 cars. And one day, the accountants or the people that worked for her came, they said, hey, we have to take your Corona in for a service. So they took it in and they said, Jill, the service people said this car is no longer safe to drive. They made that up. And they said, you need to go out and buy a current model car. And she went out and bought the smallest, cheapest Volvo station wagon you can buy. It was red. That was who she was. And people would go, people think rich people just roll around in Rolls Royces and all this kind of stuff. She never did. Now she had her own private jet, right? She had a couple of yachts. One of them she kept in Capri, when she visited her house in Capri. So it wasn't like she was living like a pauper, but
Yeah.
driving an expensive car was not her thing. I don't know how I got on talking about rich people, but it's an interesting life they lead, I think is where we were with that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I used to say to people, because I imagine you and I are actually probably similar in this way, is that one of the reasons why the clients we worked with liked us is because we didn't treat them differently. We treated them like regular people. Is that? Am I assuming correctly?
Yeah, I think so. I never had that gene of being impressed by money.
Yeah.
I didn't come from money. I knew my place. You mentioned earlier, the assistants, right? The personal assistants. They would always come and go. Personal assistants are like brooms.
Yeah.
They sweep clean at first, and then you need to go get a new broom. And I literally I wrote about personal assistants in my book, Fitness Confidential, just briefly, because they all do the same thing. At some point, they think that they're the celebrity.
Yep.
They're driving expensive cars. They're being jetted around on the jet with the client. They get used to something that they don't. And by the way, these, as you know, these people make like 70 or 80 or 90,000, maybe 100,000 a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And
But
they
you know why that money goes so far, right? Because when you're a personal assistant, you're giving up your entire life to that celebrity. So you don't have a family, you don't have kids, you don't have even probably a relationship because you're just always jetting around. So it is. You are 100% right. All the assistants I worked around, they all started to eventually think that they were the money, that they were like the celebrity, and it was like, you're stepping it, because usually when that happened, Vinny, about a month later they were fired.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't take long. You see it happening in real time, right? You see it happening. I know of one assistant that's been with his client. It's a male client. I'll tell, if you remind me after the show, I'll tell you who it is. And it's a male assistant, and they've been inseparable for about 30 some odd years. That assistant went to this client. He was Michael Jackson's assistant. Michael was taking, and he was Michael's road assistant, right? Road manager assistant when Michael was going and moonwalking and all that. He was taking a break one summer, and this guy, instead of just taking a break while Michael wasn't touring, he went to this other guy and never went back. And they're still together today. Matter of fact, I owe him a phone call. Right? He's that he's that guy, right? But that's one. That's
Yeah, it's
one of one.
rare. But I also have to say, like, hearing that story of him and the few people I know that are longtime assistants, it's a beautiful relationship usually. Sometimes a little codependent, but usually a very beautiful relationship of a very trusted. They become trusted friends,
Yeah,
to that celebrity.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes, if the guy's the celebrity, the wife works as an assistant. I'm sure you've seen
Yeah.
that. And sometimes, if the wife is a big celebrity, the husband works as an assistant. And it doesn't mean they're peeing on the other person. It's they just work. Yeah, I'll give a perfect example of that. Nancy Reagan
Hmm.
protected Ronald Reagan. She was the assistant,
Oh yeah.
right? And that was very, very clear,
Well,
right?
near the end, she was, when his mind was going, like, right, she was really running the show even more
She,
so
she was,
then.
she was the caretaker. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, there are a lot of situations like that where the wife or the husband becomes the assistant, and it works. It works in their relationship. I'm glad we're having this different kind of conversation today, James, because I'm not in that world anymore, and
Yeah.
I've been out of it now for I've been here for like 5 years. And I reflect back on those 30 some odd years I was doing that. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I remember when this happened or when that happened, or just the situations and all of it. And I'm sure you do the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, it's surreal. I mean, the biggest thing I can say to people about living in that world is that it's just you fall into these bizarre circumstances, and you get to experience things that you probably wouldn't get to experience otherwise if you weren't in that kind of celebrity energy. But like there's something I can share. Like when Tom was shooting the movie Valkyrie in Berlin, Germany. Um, he commissioned this old I think it was World War II plane. It was either two or one of them. It was a biplane, so I think biplanes were two, right?
That
I
might have
can't
been
remember. Maybe
World
they
War
were
One.
one,
Yeah, it could have been one.
but either way, it was this really cool old plane, and he made it so that all of us that were there with him got to fly in it, and
Really?
so we were getting to sit in the very front of the, where the gunner would be, and then there was a pilot behind us, And, they flew us around Berlin, Germany for a little bit. And then we went back down and it, when else would I have ever experienced that?
You will never. You got to be with a Tom Cruise for that to happen, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's got me thinking about it more, it was a big story 2 months ago, and you're not really hearing about it anymore. But a lot of the houses I was in on a daily basis are no longer there. The
Yeah.
ones in the
Tragic.
Palisades and some of the beach houses.
Moon Shadows is gone. Do you remember like all those places? I mean, it's just
Hard
tragic.
to believe, right? It's just so hard to believe. And I was just going down PCH, like I was there like a month or two before that. I went to see Mike Rowe and that whole group, and I was driving down PCH from Calabasas. I went over Topanga Canyon and went down that way, and to think that all of that is wiped out now, right? And for 30 years, I was in those homes, right? And they're gone.
All you have is your memories now. That's all you got.
Yeah. And, people go, oh, it's a bunch of rich people lost their house. No, not just rich people. One of the women that worked for my podcast, she lives in Altadena, right? In a regular home. And her home was, I think her garage got burned. Every house around her is gone. And her garage is gone. Somehow it skipped the rest of her house. She got lucky. Yet she can't go back to her house. She and her husband, Tom, are living somewhere else. And they're going to be living somewhere else. I was talking to her just the other day. I was like, when are you guys getting back in? She was like, nothing's moving fast, right?
Yeah.
And you think about all of the people who lost everything, and I'm still having trouble leveling that, right?
Ditto. But Vinny, it brings up kind of what I was talking about earlier, because that period was very emotionally. I felt very emotionally distraught during those fires, even though I was on the East Coast when it happened. But just learning about all my friends losing their homes or places that I had that were a very big part of my time in Southern California, they're just gone, and it was very fascinating. So this is probably what you were experiencing too, because it was ice and snow while there was fires on the West Coast. We were experiencing ice and snow.
Yeah.
And so I was looking out my window, and I'm seeing a completely different reality than what I'm seeing on the news. And I was thinking to myself, if we were back in the day ancestrally, we would never know what's going on the West Coast. If we were a tribe that lived on the East Coast and we were in winter and they were experiencing some kind of fire, we wouldn't hear about it till maybe 5 years later, when all the tribes kind of went inward to the US and then came together and they all hung out and talked about stories. It would be a story then. It wouldn't be this is happening right now, feel the pain that we're feeling, right? It would be more of a story of like, oh, well, this happened in, 5 years ago, or whatever, however they would talk about it. And I felt very in my face about, I think we're getting exposed to things that our nervous systems can't really fathom. When you're in the fire, you're in the fire. But when you're not in the fire, hearing about that fire makes you feel like you are in the fire. How does that help you nervous system wise? How does that help you stress wise? I don't know if we're wired for that kind of information.
Well, we have too much coming at us all the time, right? And people, and we see it a lot in politics, right? I have friends. I don't talk about politics. I don't espouse what I follow, right, left, or center. But I have friends on both sides, and I have friends who are on the left who cannot stand Trump, right? They're never Trumpers. I don't want to get in a conversation with them because I don't want to hear it, right? Yet they can't help themselves. And then I'll have friends on the right who they're still talking about Kamala and Joe Biden. It's like they lost, they're gone. But can you believe that word salad, bitch? And it's like, okay, she lost. Your guy won, right? Let it go. Let it go. they're still living in that world, right? I was talking to a guy out in California a week or two ago, and he was explaining to me that he's leaving the country.
Because of politics?
And I said, well, really? Where are you going to go? Anywhere. I'm leaving the country. And I was like, why not? What's wrong with here? He's like, Vinny, is your head in the sand? Is your head? Donald Trump is going to lock me up, not me, him. He goes, Donald Trump is coming for me, and he's going to throw me in a gulag. I'm using his words. This is not, I said, a gulag? A gulag? This is the United States. We don't have gulags, number one. And why would Donald Trump come after you? Have you committed a crime? No, but I've committed a crime against Trump. And I said, you did? By the way, this is a real conversation I just had. I said, what was the crime? He goes, I talk about him every day on Facebook.
Oh,
I put my thoughts on Facebook. And I said, you need help. And he got mad. He got mad at me.
But this is kind of my point, is that we're so inundated
Right.
with information that doesn't pertain to our immediate community that I think we're so stressed out, and that
Yeah.
that whether we know it or not, we are in complete overload, information overload. And then you get things like that. You start creating stories in your head, like they're after me, conspiracies, whatever it is. We
And
make those decisions when we're in stress.
this person used to be perfectly normal, a guy I used to hang out with. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if I lived in LA, I don't know if we would be hanging out anymore. If he's got that kind of delusion going on, that he thinks that the president of the United States is going to come get him based on a Facebook post, right?
Even though supposedly they are doing it in the UK. Have you heard that? I've been hearing like they are actually, they're going after people. I don't want, obviously we don't need to go into politics, but
I
it's
don't know. I
interesting.
don't
There's
know.
something going on over there.
But I don't know if they are or not. They
Yeah, I
might
just read
be.
about it today. I was like, "What?" Like it literally the reporter, it's the Free Press. That's the one when I go to for information, and they were literally saying, "What the heck is going on in the UK?" Like this sounds like it's a fictional, sci-fi novel, but they're actually articulating how there are people that are getting attacked for saying, or getting prosecuted for saying certain things on social media.
You see, here's why I have a problem with it. You may or may not remember the story, but back during not the last election, but the one before, um, when Trump was still in office the first time, there was a story that they were running on in like legacy media, saying that Donald Trump was shutting down postal services and removing postal boxes so that people couldn't do write-in votes. And they showed these black vans on the news picking up these, unscrewing the postal boxes and putting them in the black vans and hauling them away. So I actually saw this on the news, and they were going, "Yeah, Donald Trump is removing all of these postal boxes, and he's gonna because he doesn't want people to do write-in votes." This was a real story on the news. Someone, well, that looks pretty cut and dry because that looks pretty eerie. It's a black van, right? It didn't say U.S. Postal Service inside the van.
Right.
So I was like, that looks pretty ominous, right?
Yeah.
About a month later, I was in Alexandria, Virginia. That's right around where the government is, right? And I'm pheasant hunting up in Alexandria. And there's this guy I meet during the pheasant hunt. So after the hunt, you're sitting around having a drink. And I said, "So what do you do?" And he goes, he explains, "I'm a muckety muck with the U.S. Postal Service." I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah. I said, would you mind if I ask if you're Republican or Democrat? I noticed you're not supposed to ask people you don't know and the whole thing. He goes, oh, I'm a big time Democrat. Yeah, I'm a big old lefty. And I went, all right, there you go. I said, I saw a story a while back. And he goes, the black vans picking up the mailboxes. Yeah. I said, that's why I wanted to know which side you were on because I saw it on CNN. Right. And he goes, yeah, that's a real story, but it's not what they said it is.
Huh.
And I said, do tell. And he said, what they're doing is what they always do. Whenever mailboxes aren't being used, the big giant mailboxes, we don't want to have to keep them up and it costs money and the whole thing. We weed them out of areas, right? Areas where people just go to the post office to deliver and the whole thing. We'll take the standard boxes and just pull them out. And we do it all the time. I said, do you do them in the dead of night? Because they showed this happening. And he goes, well, we don't do it at all. We contract with other people and they do it whenever they do it. They can do it 24 hours a day. And I said, is it possible that CNN knew that? He goes, oh yeah, they knew.
Yeah.
They absolutely
It's just fitting their narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, they made it work into a narrative that they want. So when you hear that kind of thing, and the guy who's a muckety muck in the post office tells you that this is what's going on, yet CNN decides they're going to lie to us about it and go, look what they're doing, right? I don't know if I believe what's going on in England.
Yeah, it doesn't make you trust the news at all. I mean, look, we were talking about working for these celebrities, right? I can tell you positively during the time that I worked for Tom, the articles or the news that was out about him in the magazines, the I don't know what you'd call it, the what do you call those tabloids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the news that was in those tabloids, 90 98% of it completely false. Completely made up. I was there. I'm like, this isn't true. And then there would be one article in a year that comes out, and then you're like, oh, someone talked because that's accurate. You know what I mean? But that was it. Like one article out of an entire year's worth of news.
I agree with you. And, the whole reason I started, you know why I started a podcast? Do you know the story behind that?
No, why did you?
I was still training people full time and I had written the book. And, William Morris Endeavor got a hold of my book because I handed it to one of my important clients and he walked it into his agent. So the agent had to read it and they fell in love with my book. They sent it to the book department and they wanted to represent this book. So the first thing they did was they Googled me and I didn't exist in Google. You put Vinnie Tortorich into Google back then, I did not exist.
Sure, yeah.
And they called me in and they said, we love this book, but we have a problem. You don't exist on the internet. And I said, yeah, that's by design. And they said, well, why wouldn't you want to exist on the internet? I said, think about it. Every time someone gets in trouble, I'm gonna take someone who I never worked with. Britney Spears was getting into a lot of trouble at one point, right?
Yeah.
Every news story said what, James? Sources close to Britney.
Right.
It means a chef, a masseuse, or a trainer. Those are the three sources that are close. And those are the three people that would sell the story. I never wanted anyone to know who I worked with because I didn't want to ever become tempted by sources close to. Right?
Yeah.
But people, as you know, people would take that paycheck and they would talk.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think we also share that as integrity, I mean, that's something that was really important to me when I was working with these clients is I treated them like regular human beings, but B, I took their privacy seriously. Like if like even when I talk about Tom or anybody at this point, it's been a long time, but when I talk about it from what my experience it was of working for them, I don't talk about their intimacy, like things that they did, because that would be out of integrity. It's like that's none of my business what they do, and It's no one else's business.
Actually, let's give the audience a little bit. We're getting to the end of the show here.
Yeah.
Um, Tom Cruise is got to be my age. He's got to be 62, and he still looks 42. He took his shirt off for Maverick, right? The
He
shirt.
takes it off for almost every movie, doesn't he?
Yeah, pretty much. And the guy looks pretty damn good, right? What's the diet like for him?
Oh, well, I can't speak to his current movies, of course, but back in the day when I was cooking for any celebrity, I was very fortunate in that I I was very clear in kind of what I did and why I did what I did. And so a lot of the people I worked with they would come in saying, "Well, I want you to follow this diet, this is what we found works." And I said, "Well, but that doesn't really stand with the things that I do." And so let me tell you what I do. And then I would tell them what I do. And they'd say, "Okay, well, we'll do what you do." And then that would work. And it was usually a lot less effort as well, because they were sometimes, being hyper vigilant about calories or using all these kind of fake Franken, whatever foods, these foods that,
Butters and Frank. Yeah,
yeah, or
I have all
something
that problem.
that
Yeah.
was fitting. I'm not saying Tom, I'm saying anyone. I'm saying like anyone, you know how it is. They're following the trend of the day. Whatever the trend is at that moment, that's what they want. And I was like, no, I don't believe that that's what we should be doing. The thing that we should stay focused on is making sure it's all real food, making sure that everything that I'm making is from scratch and I'm in control of every one of those ingredients. And so that means if instead of, for example, if I'm making a salad dressing, and usually a lot of chefs will just throw sugar in there and they'll do all that kind of stuff because it gets too bitter or something like that. So they're trying to sweeten it out and balance it. I would throw in a date. And back in the day, no one was doing that. It's like I was throwing in a real food, not some, processed sugar or anything like that, but a real food. And so I was always thinking like that. I would even, for example, I would caramelize onions to bring out their natural sweetness. And that's what I would blend. I would make sauces that way. Um, I would roast cauliflower and then use that to thicken things. So I was using real food to do what most chefs would be using flours, sugars, or some kind of processed ingredient to do.
Yeah, because look, I mean, Tom is one of those guys that he stays in shape no matter what.
Oh yeah,
Like,
he's very disciplined.
yeah, there's no off for him. Like, I'll give an example. Kirstie Alley would, man, the swing she would go, and then when she got older, she just stayed fat.
Yeah.
But Kirstie Alley back in the day would get really, really thin and do a movie or do it, and then get fat again. Right. So there was a lot of yo-yo people like that.
A lot of them do that. A lot of them do that.
So many of them do it. And there was some of them that I would get the phone call, right? Because they were getting ready to do, like they would get a contract, and I'm not going to mention any names. You guys can go figure it out. They would get a contract with Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or something,
Yeah.
and they're fat, right? And they would go take the fat picture and go, all right, Vin, you got 6 weeks, get in there. And I would have to work with their chef and do this and that and basically almost live with them. But they were getting such a big paycheck to do almost nothing, right? One day of work. And they were getting a big paycheck. And you know who these people are. We don't have to talk about it, right? And they would go from fat to skinny. And and they were all, one-time child actors or one-time big deals on television or in movies, or sometimes they were singers and whatnot, but they would go back and forth. Right. And you would have to go in and just, I might have told the story before. There was one big time actress, right? And Weight Watchers gave her a contract and said, all right, you got to go lose weight. So, and then they called me in. Her agents called me in. Her managers, not her agents, her managers. Like, all right, you got to go take 60, 70 pounds off, just like we had you do with Margaret Cho. And I was like, oh God. And this was I'll tell you who this was off the air. if you remind me after the show.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God. So I go in and I meet with her. And when I met with her, I could tell she was high. She
Oh
was on
no.
some kind of amphetamine. And I said, hey, what are you on right now? She goes, I just did some blow. You want some? And I said, no, I don't do blow. And she goes, yeah, I've already, she was being funny. Aren't I doing good? I'm already starting. I'm going to lose weight. Blow
Yeah.
helps me lose weight. And I said, listen, I'm going to be working you pretty hard. I can't have you doing blow when we're working out because you can die. Right. And she goes, well, I'm not going to stop. So I called her agent and I called her manager and I said, tear up the contract. I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. And then I saw in the news a couple of days later that the contract ended, right? Weight Watchers didn't want to work with this particular actress anymore because, she didn't want to pay attention pretty much. They didn't talk about the blow, but it was blow.
But it is funny though, because you're bringing something up that maybe some people don't know is that the thing that the person is advertising isn't necessarily the thing that helps them lose weight.
Oh, it never is.
It never is.
It is. I can't tell you the number of times it was something else. It's like, and you could tell, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's like, I mean, what I'm kind of personally experiencing to my chagrin, because I wish that it wasn't true. But the reality is if you want to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. It's like that's kind of what I'm finding, particularly as I get older. It's like I don't have as much movement as I used to, and it's like if I'm not in a calorie deficit, I don't really lose weight.
And, there's a lot of truth behind that. And, people think, oh, I just have to eat NSNG, no sugars, no grains, or I can just eat the lion
No,
diet or the carnivore diet. I can't tell you the number of carnivores who told me I lost 50 or 60 pounds, then it stopped. And I was like, what are you doing? I'm still eating carnivore. And they're eating two strips or two ribeyes at dinner. It's like, you cannot eat that amount of calories and go to sleep on it and expect your body to lose weight. It's just not going to, you might not gain any weight, but you're not going to lose weight.
No.
Right. You still have to pay attention.
Yeah. You can get too much protein, you get too much fat, you can do too much carbs. Like there's too much you can get too much of life sometimes, right?
James, I've been saying from day one in this podcast, you can go back and listen to episodes from the beginning. There is nothing you can do with impunity and get away with it. There's nothing. Yeah. And people go, what about water? Drink 3 gallons of water straight. You're dead. You will be dead within hours.
Yep.
Not even, I'm saying 3. Drink 2 gallons straight. Watch it wash out all of your electrolytes. You'll go into a coma. You will die. That's happened to people. Too much water will kill you. Anything with impunity will kill you. And we're going to make that the final word. Folks, Pluck seasoning. Hey, James, remember last time you were on, you gave a 20% discount to my people?
I did. Let's do it again. And
Can we do it?
Let's do it. 20% off. Use the code Vinnie. Capital V I N N I E.
Capital V I N N I E. Capital E. Folks, not only do you have to remember to put the IE in there and not the wimpy Y, but you got to put the capital V.
Yeah.
All right. So capital VINNIE over at, what's it called? Pluckseasonings.com.
Yeah. So go to eatpluck.com. And, we didn't talk about it enormously, but that's okay. Cause hopefully you go look at it and check it out. But, Pluck is for people that think organs are gross, that they don't like the taste, but they want the benefit. We make it taste good. We make it easy and we make it delicious.
Hey, I'm running out of my Pluck. Can I put in the 20%?
Yeah, you better. You better use it now, Vinny. No, it's good for as long as you're around, it's good.
All right. So yeah, I'm going to go get myself some more because I think I'm running out. So go to eatpluck.com and get that. The podcast is called Everyday Ancestral Podcast. I've been on it. I was only invited on once. So apparently I didn't do a very good job. So
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that, Vinny. You know, you're up. No, I'm kidding. You were, we only started in November. I think you were guest number 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we haven't been doing it long enough for you to come back yet, but I have to tell everyone, like, you know, I got the biggest compliment from Vinny, and I just want to thank you again for it, which is at the end of the podcast, he said to me, he said, this is your first, you know, you just started, like, because you did a really good job. Like, you gave me a compliment, and I really just really meant a lot to me, because I respect you, but I also see you as, you know, an OG of podcasting, like that you are an expert at podcasting. You understand it. You've been doing it a long time. You're comfortable with it. So to get a compliment from you that I was doing a good job at the beginning of my podcasting career, that really meant a lot. So thank you for that.
Well, it's because you're studied and you have poise. And I'm not an easy interview, because I'll start throwing out weird stuff, and people that don't know how to interview won't follow along, right? They don't see where I'm headed. And so, in other words, like, I'm going to make up something really weird, like if I'm in the middle of someone's podcast and I go, last night I raped a nun, and they go, yeah, so tell us about the book. You didn't hear, like, the really, really weird thing I just said? By the way, folks, I've never said that, but if I say
No.
something and, a new interviewer won't know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
You followed. I mean, you right from the get go. I think I asked her, I said, James, how long have you been doing this? She's like, you're like one of the first ones. And I'm like, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
No, it meant a lot. It means a lot, and it meant a lot. So thank you for that. And then of course, thank you for guesting. You know, I think I feel very blessed, you know, that we met. I feel very blessed that I created Pluck. I mean, I feel I very, my mission is to try to help people, and I feel like that is what I'm getting to do, and I'm just so grateful that um, we live in a time where we can embrace these technologies to amplify these messages, whether it's for you through documentaries and podcasts and books, for me with, you know, the food product, and then now starting a podcast. That is where, you know, modern living is pretty cool, you know, that we get to reach a wider audience than we would normally.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for hanging with me like this today, because we went all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And I like doing that every now. I like to shake it out a bit every now and again, which I don't get to do. By the way,
Mm.
I had a great time talking to your buddy just yesterday,
With
Bryce Apple.
Bryce.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy. That show came out. So, folks, go back a week or two and find Dr. Bryce Applebaum. Very interesting dude. Really enjoyed
Yeah.
the guy. Yeah.
He's doing such great stuff with vision therapy. My I don't know if he told the story, but my daughter, my youngest daughter, had no depth perception and was seeing doubles. We did not know this,
Oh,
because this is
wow.
not something you learn when they're a young age, because it doesn't show up in eye tests.
Hmm.
Um, but he had suspicions, and then we took her to his clinic, and he tested her, and he helped her. She went to 3 or 4 intensives over the last year, and she now has what most you know, vision what is it, ophthalmologist, is that what you call a vision doctor?
Yeah. There's an
Yeah.
optometrist and an ophthalmologist. And
Yeah,
I
so
can't remember
yeah,
which.
optometrist, I think. But anyway, they would say what he did is impossible, and yet he did it with vision therapy. So,
Well,
and it
I'm
worked.
looking at him because, I'm a target guy. I shoot archery, I shoot smooth bore, I trap and skeet. And there's a couple of things I want to correct. And I think if I could get my vision straight, I can become better. So I'm looking at working with him. So
Yeah,
thank
it's good
you.
stuff, and it works. It works. You just got to do the work, just like anything, right? You just got to
Yeah.
do the work.
Hang on. Don't go away, because I have to wait until this uploads. Folks, you know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com and click through the banner. Rate and review this podcast whenever you get a chance, because, look, I say rate and review, and I know you guys just go, yeah, I'll get to it later. Do it right now, because you're going to forget later. So rate and review this podcast and go check out Everyday Ancestral. I enjoy being on the show. Maybe one day they'll bring me back again. On behalf of James Barry, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living, and let's do it with just a bit more of the guest who.